Hello and welcome to the India Hangout on this bright Monday afternoon. The Modi Governance Challenge. How will he deliver it? What will be the role of technology and what are the kind of examples we can look at to understand how it could go, where it could go and can it scale up? My co-anchor Ayaz Memon.
Thanks,
Ayaz,
Govindraj.
what are the challenges ahead? Technology will play a key role, we know that. But before we get into it, how do you see it?
The use of technology was evident in the campaign trail itself.
Exactly,
the amount of technology he's used. And I think he's made no bones of the fact that technology is going to be a big driver in how this country evolves or develops from here. So, I mean, the million-dollar question is how far and how well he will use it and what all will be the tools that he's planning to use.
Right.
As of now, as we talk, we're still in suspense about the ministry itself, the cabinet.
Right.
The names are there, but the portfolio is yet to be decided. So, but I think that the way he ran Gujarat, so while he's hands-on, I think he wants all the buttons and the levers with him, but technology to be the great kind of conduit.
That's a very good point. So the technology is important, but so is the controls to the technology or the buttons as you call it. Sanjay Jaju, IT Secretary of Andhra Pradesh joins us. Very good afternoon to you, Sanjay. So what we want to try and understand is, tell us of course a little more about your own e-governance effort. Potentially the largest in the world. It's called Me Seva. And also what we are trying to understand is how can this be scaled up if governance and governance driven by technology is a way to go forward for India?
Yeah, thanks Govind. Let me first come to the initiative that we ran in this state. You've mentioned that it's arguably the world's biggest e-governance initiative. And this project Me Seva, as the word stands, means Aapki Seva, that is at your service in Telugu. And what we have tried to do is, as part of this project, broken the departmental silos, brought the departments together and made technology become the integrator. We've more than 350 services pertaining to government departments. These are kind of G2C and the G2B services are being delivered through this platform. And on the one hand, we give all these services through the internet on our website, but at the same time, for those who do not have access to internet, we provide them these services through the common kiosks. We call them Me Seva centers, which are being done by local entrepreneurs. And to a large extent, this has also become a harbinger for ensuring democracy, the digital democracy at local levels. And we expect these centers to double up as digital knowledge centers in future. Coming to the replication part.
Sanjay, can I interrupt you for a second? So can you give us an example of a few services, particularly your most popular services, and how citizens in Andhra Pradesh are using them and perhaps benefiting?
See, out of 350 services, the bulk of the services pertain to the revenue department. Revenue department is basically the first tier of administration, which is at the local level, district collectors and we call them mandals here, and the administration below district. And for example, land records, now which is a fundamental information which citizens require for taking up agricultural activities or getting agricultural loans. So this is one of our killer services, if I may use that word. And people are able to get the copies of their land records and their entitlements online through these kiosks, and this to a very large extent has benefited them from kind of multiple visits.
So what about transactions? I mean, receiving money, subsidies, benefits, and so on.
As far as Me Seva, although we use technology, as far as the state government is concerned, we make use of technology in most of the other government programs as well, when we do some real tangible efforts. But when it comes to Me Seva is about the intangible work, the regulatory administration, the kind of services where you give permits and permissions and documents and proceedings. I mean, these are the kind of things which, as a state, we have ordained people to get. I mean, we've told people to get birth certificates, driving licenses. So Me Seva actually looks into these intangible services which the state delivers, and all the 350 services pertain to that particular category.
And how many services, actually amongst the services, how many transactions of these services have you done so far since Me Seva has been set up, and what is the kind of run rate that you're seeing today?
See, it's about a year and a half since we stabilized Me Seva in terms of the outreach, in terms of opening up centers all across the state, and in bringing together all these services. I mean, we've in this year, 1.5 years time, we have so far completed 4.5 crore transactions. And 4.5 crore transactions essentially pertain to all these 350 services. Although we do another 10 crore transactions which pertain to the payment of electricity bills and utility bills and other stuff, which also helps citizen to a large extent. But in terms of the MeSeva core services, we do on an approximate basis about 3 crore transactions in a year. 3 crore citizen and business transactions a year.
So what are these services where there's been a large emphasis from the users? What is it that they are really asking for? Because that could be like almost like a prototype or a sample for the rest of the country.
Yeah, I mean, that's where I was talking about the replication part. I mean, to a very large extent, all these services are the services which are demand based. I mean, these are demanded by the citizens, and that's how the identification process began. When we began the identification process, we were looking at those services which have huge citizen interface and lot of demand from the citizen, and we also looked at those services where you have a lot of corruption and red tape. And so when the process of identification began, we were first looking at those services which can have large number of transactions, and that's where these kind of land record services or the municipality services or the revenue department services, these permissions and permits, and that process started. But later, when we realized that this model is proving to be very successful, then we moved it to a large extent, and then we finally brought in a lot of even government to business related services. You'll be surprised that in our state, all the mining leases and permissions are being given through the MeSeva system. All the industrial department permissions are being given through this system. So we started with the G2C kind of services, but then later on we moved it to the G2B services, and now it's a completely integrated platform, one-stop shop for all the activities which citizen and business does with government.
Sanjay, what's the biggest pain point that you feel you've removed from the citizen's life, the citizen that's been interacting with you in your state?
See, if you look at the project of this nature, I mean, now in Delhi they're talking in terms of integrating ministries, and the biggest problem is, as somebody rightly pointed out, that governance has kind of become correspondence in this country. I mean, what we call off as government is basically what's happening is correspondence move from one department to another. And in many such cases, what we have tried to do and what we do in government is actually make the citizen become the purveyor of that information. I mean, a citizen requires a birth certificate because the school where he has to get an admission for his wards require that certificate. So what actually happens is goes to one department, collects that certificate, goes to another department, carries that certificate and hands it over to that department. So what we have tried to do is to bring in this integration. Citizen is not aware of these departmental silos. He only knows one monolithic frame called government. So the technology can play a huge role. Why can the databases not talk to each other? Why should citizen become a purveyor of this information? I think that was a guiding philosophy.
Right.
So the biggest pain was how to break these silos.
Yeah.
Because every department would like to hold on to the turf that they have, and that's where the vested interests, I call them the lobby brigade, and how to cut that was the biggest challenge that we had in the project. And technology is
right. So Sanjay, we are obviously going to come very shortly to what it would take to scale this up to a national level. I mean, of course, many states have e-governance programs too, but yours is different and has some amount of a head start. But tell us, in terms of actual transactions done, you said that you've got over 4 crore transactions that have happened. Have all of these been fulfilled, and what's the fulfillment ratio?
Yeah, so that's a good question. In MeSeva, we were when we started the conceptualization of this project, the first part that we wanted to figure out was how many of these services can be delivered online across the counter. That means the citizen comes, makes a request, and he gets his service online without that service to be routed to the department workflow. And we realized that at least 1/3 of the services and the 1/3 of the transactions that we do can actually be converted into kind of across the counter services. This was possible, for example, look at land records. Now, earlier the citizen had to go to a Tehsildar's office, make a request for land records. Tehsildar will give him some 7 days time or stuff like that. And then Tehsildar will look at his records, make that land record copy, and after 7 days sign it with his signature in an ink and hand it over to the citizen. So now to monitor all this always becomes a huge challenge, even though we may have certain citizen charter time limits and stuff like that. What we have tried to do is some of those seemingly workflow-based services have been now converted into a online system by integrating all these databases and making these databases signed by in bulk, in advance by the concerned functionaries. So what effectively happens is it becomes a download. So when a citizen now goes and approaches a MeSeva Center for land records, those records are already signed in bulk by the concerned functionaries. So he just needs to go and give some of the details of the survey numbers and stuff like that, and he's able to get a printout, which is digitally signed by the concerned functionary. So 1/3 of these services are this variety, while the rest of them, where there is some mandatory requirement of an inspection or an inquiry, we have fixed clear citizen charter time limits. That means, for example, a service which needs to be delivered in 15 days, and we understand that the process also requires 15 days, we've set the time for 15 days. Some services have 30 days, some services have even 7 days. So what effectively happens is with these kind of time limits, then we look at the adherence of the delivery system to those time limits, and those things are being monitored very closely. You would be very happy to note that out of 4.5 crore transactions that we have done, the across the counter variety is 1/3, which is about 1.5 crore, while the rest of the 3 crore transactions, the current numbers which have gone beyond the SLAs are just about 3.5 lakhs. So that is the kind of.
So you're saying 3.5 lakh transactions have not been completed. That's what you're saying, right?
Yeah, they have gone beyond the citizen charter time limits out of the 3 crore transactions that we have done in this particular category.
Okay.
Yeah, so as I gather, one thing is that there is increased transparency, obviously, because of the use of technology. It also means that there is, less need for maybe government servants, so to speak, to just move files around. But are there any obvious pitfalls that people need to guard against?
See, the first pitfall would be that we have to all understand that technology is only an enabler. What you need is a system wherein there is political and administrative will to adapt and adopt technology. Now, we have created this system. Now, tomorrow, let's say, for example, the successors decide that, look, technology is there, but I'm not going to make use of all these tables. I'm not going to even monitor the disposal of these applications. Then the whole system may fall flat. So I won't call it the failure of the technology. It would be more of failure of the implementation process. So these kind of processes do require constant political and administrative will to address grievances which come in through this system. And at the same time, you also need to understand that technology is changing very fast. It's a very dynamic situation now. I mean, you have now in the country mobile phones which actually have transformed the way we used to look at digital literacy. You have people wielding WhatsApp. You have, even those who were not digitally connected, say about a year and a half back, they all look digitally connected now. So possibly we need to look at solutions wherein we move these platforms into the emerging platforms that are coming in. And I think that's where we will need to have a strong focus on constant updation of such projects over a period of time.
Right. So Sanjay, okay, now let's take this to the next level. And that's the subject that we're trying to deal with today as well. If this were, there is a larger governance challenge in this country. The new government that's come in has obviously ridden on the plank of governance. To deliver that, technology will play a role, but now we are talking about a national integrated approach to this. I mean, of course, there have been some national integrated approaches, but we are talking about doing something at a much larger scale than ever that's ever been done. Is that going to be simple or feasible or as feasible as we think it is?
See, as far as governments are concerned, the whole process of government is broken up into different tiers in our country. People do not appreciate it. For example, you may like to blame your member of parliament for the road not laid in front of your house, but the fact is that road is not laid by the central government. That road is laid by the local municipal corporation or the Gram Panchayat. So you have actually 3 tiers. You have the local governments, you have the state governments, and you have the national government. Now, if we look at all the 3 forms of government, the first thing we will need to understand is the very purpose of a government department is broadly to cater to some citizen need. Now, it may be a very tangible citizen need like drinking water supply or a road in front of a house, or it may be an absolutely intangible kind of a thing for the citizen, take care of the defenses of the country. So the whole process has to be possibly divided into these compartments, which are those departments which have citizen interface or business interface, and they may be at the central level, they may be at the state level, they may be at the local level. And how do we make use of technology to improve that interface? And I think, to my mind, we may talk of trying to improve this interface by putting in some citizen charter time limits and displaying some boards and RTI and stuff like that, but that won't happen unless we make use of technology. We will not be able to quantify where the breaks are and where the bottlenecks are, and B, technology is the most cost-effective method of trying to improve this interface.
Right.
So my whole approach would be that at all these levels, what would be required is to identify all the touch points where the interface is, and weave in technology. At the same time, try and understand where we can do away with those transactions. See, the real situation would be, as far as regulatory administration, the best thing. If you have a situation wherein you don't need to have a driving license, it's all available online somewhere, and a citizen need not copy of that driving license with him. So technically, that's the ideal situation. But because we have ordained that these are the things which a citizen needs to possess, so we need to identify all those touch points, do away with all those points where possibly technology can integrate various departments together, and wherever we cannot do all that, then try and make use of technology to ensure that citizen need not run
that's
from
it. No, that's a general point, and I take that. Okay, let me before I kind of come back to it, a few questions which have come in. So the first one is from Sameer. He asks, what efforts are taken to institutionalize the use of technology so that the use of technology remains even with government or Chief Minister, Prime Minister changes, which is political changes? And there's another question from Shruti. She says, what role can public-private partnerships play in this area?
Yeah, I mean, very important. I mean, the first part is we may do projects of this nature, but the fact of the matter is that these projects have to be sustained beyond the life of the incumbent, somebody like us, or beyond the life of the governments. And I think, to that extent, what we need to do is that allow these projects to develop critical mass. And for example, as when we were developing the MeSeva project, our principal premise used to be that by the time we leave this project should have sufficient critical mass where it cannot be undone. And I think that also happens through public-private partnerships. So these two questions are actually related. For example, in the MeSeva process, although we've used a lot of private companies which have developed the software and the applications for the MeSeva, but all the kiosks that we have in the state, more than 7,500 kiosks, the MeSeva center that we run in the state, they're not run by the state. They're not even owned by the state. They're all owned by private individuals, which agglomerate through a company. And all these individuals are eking out their livelihood through these centers. And of course, they are competing with each other because, services can be delivered from anywhere to anywhere. So these are the people who would always be, provide a critical mass, a kind of an interest in the project and in the future of the project. So that's one. And secondly, we in our state, we have also created an institutional structure in the form of a directorate for e-governance services. I mean, this directorate's core mandate is to bring in as many services as possible into the ESD framework. And thirdly, the legal part. In our state, we have passed the electronic service delivery rules through the legislature, which actually mandates that every government department within 3 years of that act being passed.
There's a central act as well which is coming on that, right? Is that how does that, will that run concurrently or will it supersede?
Yeah, I mean, the central act will work two ways. I think central act would apply to all the central government ministries.
Okay.
That all those ministries have citizen points, they will have to do that. And possibly the same act can also become a model act for the state assemblies to adopt for their respective state services and maybe even the local body services.
Okay.
So, it would be very useful. It will at least lay the legal foundation for what we're talking right now.
Right.
So as I understand it, the two biggest requirements are, one is to institutionalize the process so that it stays on, it doesn't go with the incumbent, you don't revert back to the old situation again. The other is that obviously you need to keep a tab on how technology evolves, because you don't want to be left behind where the technology is concerned.
Yeah, and the technology is changing very fast. I mean, it's changing much more faster than how the governments change. So it's important that we are very dynamic in that, and that's where the role of the private sector becomes important. I mean, when we develop this project, even for services development, we have used the latest technologies, and it's not as if we have some in-house team which develops all these codes and softwares. So make use of the latest technology, and of course, Department of Information Technology from Government of India has already laid out certain instructions and guidelines for the development of softwares and issues of interoperability of those softwares, in issues of making use of open source and open standards mainly, so that we don't get into a situation where we get vendor locked and we are not able to update our systems in tune with
so Sanjay, tell us, two questions again. One is a policy question and one is a execution question. If we were to, I mean, there are many states which obviously have similar efforts, right, or at varying levels and varying degrees of reach. Now, if there has to be a more nationally integrated model of governance or e-governance delivery, which fits with what the incoming government has been in some ways promising to do, what would it take? Because this is 30 states and only a few states or a handful of states literally have got the kind of backbone and the digitization the way you've got.
Yeah, it would require multiple steps, and some of those steps have already been taken. For example, there is a national e-governance plan which is in place, which has provided sufficient budgets to the states in terms of setting up the state data centers or creating the statewide area networks, and even the Common Service Center program, which actually sets apart some money for setting up these kiosks. But unfortunately, what happens at the state level now? Before Me Seva started, we had all these three initiatives, and 2007 we started those initiatives, and we had the state data center, we had the statewide area network, and state data center was not even utilized to an extent of 1%, because when you have no services, obviously you don't have servers to put in, so what do you do with that? The statewide area network was not even utilized to the extent of 10%, except for some routine video conferences and some interneting. I don't think people were even making use of it because there are hardly any applications running on it. Coming to the common service centers, we set up common service centers from 2000 in the year 2007, and by 2010, for want of services, because departments didn't give mandate to start any services, everybody was languishing, and by 2010 we had absolutely nothing. But when we started the Me Seva initiative, we realized that we need to work on under this backdrop. We already have this infrastructure available. How do we make use of this infrastructure?
Sanjay, yeah. So Sanjay, there's a question here which perhaps preempts what you're saying. So Samir again asks, do you suggest a ministry for e-governance at the center? What will your recipe be for a new government?
No, there's already a ministry. For example, there's a Ministry for Information Technology and Electronics, which is known as DIT in Government of India. There's already a ministry. Obviously, that ministry can play a huge role in amongst the central ministries to try and get them on board, because there are a lot of central ministries which have huge citizen interface or business interface. For example, you have
can a central level ministry, even more invigorated than perhaps what it was before, push this through a sort of federated structure like India, with because it appears to me that states where this has taken off is really because the states have taken the initiative, not because someone from the center has been pushing.
No, also, Govind, would it lead to state-center conflicts? Because there are certain things that the states want, in the kind of structure that we have. Is there a possibility of that, and would an integrated approach, say, controlled by the center, work in a federal system like ours?
Sanjay?
No, there are two things here. Yes, in a federal system, there is a thin line which separates, encroachment of spaces. So we need to be very cautious about that. I mean, central government cannot mandate state governments to do a particular thing, especially if it is falling in a concurrent list. And some of these services possibly fall even in the state list. But now what is important is even at the central government level. I'll just give you a small example. There is a project called eBiz, which was supposed to be an online initiative, which was supposed to be providing single window clearances to businesses. And how pathetic our situation is in terms of, the World Bank's doing business index. I think we rank somewhere in the possibly in the last ranks of in international level. And you'd be surprised that even many of the central ministries which were part of that particular project were supposed to be giving, say, environmental clearance, or supposed to be giving industrial exemptions, or there are a lot of these central subjects which are involved. Obviously, there are some state subjects also involved when an industry has to be set up. And to your surprise, you will know that there was resistance from many departments even to join that small integrated window. So I think what's important is for somebody to break these departmental silos. And allow them to make use of technology. And why should they be holding on to their turf when technology can provide a medium of exchange between the departments? At the same time, then you have a lot of state government departments which are involved. For example, if you have to set up a business, the technology can be easily made use of. Another part is not just creating a software and putting up a portal. What's important, and we were quite mindful of this particular fact when we did Me Seva project, is the capacity building part. You have a whole set of bureaucracy at all levels. These people have varying levels of capabilities in especially IT skills. So when we run these projects, we have to be running a parallel program to train these functionaries and hone their IT skills so that it doesn't come as a surprise to them. For example, in Me Seva, this again a very happy situation. Nothing in Me Seva is done without a digital signature. We don't make use of ink signature in this project at all. All our 350 services, all our functionaries, tehsildars or police inspectors or municipal commissioners or sub-registrars, you call them, all of them make use of digital signatures. It was a Herculean effort to, number one, provide them the digital signature, then train them to how they operate their digital signature, then also train them on the whole functionality of the project. So I think it has to be looked at in a very, very holistic sense. I agree that central government can do only so much as far as the state governments are concerned, but to an extent, even the central ministries need to be properly integrated when we look at the common interface, and possibly technology provides that interface.
So Sanjay, so once you have digital signatures, and you did say that it takes time to ensure that every layer of the administration gets those digital signatures. Does the system ensure in some ways that people have to sign off in a certain time, and if they don't, there's a flag being thrown up?
Absolutely. Many states have these electronic service delivery acts. Where they have actually mandated that if a particular service is not delivered within that time limit, penalties can be imposed on the concerned defaulting officer. And I don't know, you're in the media, you can find out what are the kind of penalties which might have been enforced. Absolutely nothing in comparison to the promises which are made in those acts. Because you just don't know. Without technology, everybody would say that, look, I received this application today and I've done it in 15 days. So people will not even take cognizance of the application that might be lying on their table. But in technology, in a situation like this, it's impossible because this is timed by the computer. And the day you sign it is also timed by the computer because your digital signature is being used. And that's exactly the reason why I wanted to make use of the digital signature, so that we can really quantify and then reward good performance and punish the offending parties. And this is not possible.
Have you actually fined people within the government, or have actually people been been forced to pay, or have they actually cuffed up penalties, government officials?
No, for example, what I was referring to was certain acts which are there in other states, where they have not electronic act, but they call them public service guarantee acts or some such things, wherein they say actually that if a particular service is not delivered within a time limit, then they assess that time limit, and based on that, certain penalties are imposed. What I'm saying is they have not integrated technology in many of those acts, and that's exactly the reason why those fines are nothing.
Was in your case, in Andhra's case, for instance, are you able to do that?
No, in our case, we have not gone in for the penalty system so far.
Okay.
We have only gone for making use of technology to figure out where the lapses are, and then we make use of technology to reward good performances. We have every 2 months we conduct Me Seva awards where we felicitate good functionaries. But I think our larger vision was that we will now bring in an act which would also impose certain penalties on those of not conforming to the guidelines and the time limit set.
Right.
So I have one, I think a crucial question to ask. How resistant are people to change? What did it take to convince people that e-governance is the way to go, including in the Babudam, people are reluctant to change. They think that they might lose their only source of control or power or, livelihood or whatever it might be.
See, to start with, there would be always these, doubting promises. They will always, they always know that, it's going to, a lot of people used to, in fact, call our department as, are you information technology or intrusion technology? Why are you not allowing us to do our work? And it used to be, the backing from the top, the political will at the top, which used to make departments come to us. And once you have that backing, and once you are able to show them the process, then gradually what happens is the detractors fall into place. I'll also give you a small example. We also need to strategize when you develop services. For example, certain departments, when we used to start the development of services, we used to look at certain softer services, I mean the low-hanging fruits, where we knew that, it's more of a headache for the department rather than the vested interest part. So when you start with some of those services and when you prove your point, then it becomes much easier for you to take on the higher level services. And to be your surprise, initially, for example, many of the revenue associations and all, they were up in arms against us as if we were trying to encroach on their rights. And we actually wanted to tell them that, look, we're not doing that. As far as the designated officer is concerned, it still remains the same. Only thing is, he was doing it through a manual system. Now we have provided a platform, and that platform is going to help him do his work.
Sanjay, we've almost run out of time. Sanjay, we've almost run out of time. Last question before we go. You've got a bifurcation ahead of you now. How are you up to the challenge of splitting your own database into 2 different states?
Yeah, I mean, it's been the easiest for us. I mean, there are other departments which have a bigger challenge as far as IT is concerned, because it's all in the cloud, and you can always, for example, Mi Seva is going to become 2 Mi Sevas. One Mi Seva will cater to Telangana, and one Mi Seva will cater to Andhra Pradesh, effectively from 2nd of June. And the databases right now are going to be common databases, but they will be catering to both the states. And we have also put the entire software in cloud. And in fact, we are also replicating Mi Seva in 5 more states, which is for the mandate of the DIT. So our objective is that Mi Seva can become a generic platform, and states can make use of it instead of reinventing the wheel. And that's where this question of replication comes in, because India, though, is a diverse country, but there are common set of, except for the language part, there are common set of guidelines. Maybe a bit of tweaking may be required here and there, but possibly these kind of solutions can broadly be implemented across the country without too much of a change.
Right, Sanjay, thank you so much for joining us from Hyderabad. Perhaps you are one of your last interviews in the undivided state, and next time we speak to you, you will be in one of the 2 states, and I wish you all the best for that. Ayaz?
Yeah, I think, look, he's got exciting times ahead. So we'll have to wait and see actually how the new government takes up this challenge. I think one thing is clear, that the new Prime Minister is completely sold on technology. So, e-governance is going to become a fact of life.
Right. And that's a good note to end on. Thank you so much, Sanjay, and thank you, Ayaz. We're going to be back on the India Hangout very soon.